The United States says that it will supply more liquid natural gas to the European Union to help it reduce its reliance on gas supplies from Russia. In a statement, President Joe Biden says that they've agreed on a joint game plan toward that goal while accelerating progress toward a secure, clean energy future. Biden, who has been visiting Europe, says that the initiative focuses on two core issues. One, helping Europe to reduce its dependency on Russian gas as quickly as possible, and secondly, reducing Europe's demand for gas overall. The EU is aiming to cut its dependency on Russian gas by 2/3 this year and end all Russian fossil fuel imports by 2027 due to Russia's conflict with Ukraine. Russia supplies around 40% of Europe's gas needs. All right, let's get more on the story then. Let's go to Russia now. We're joined by correspondent Stuart Smith, who's in Moscow. A very good afternoon to you. Thanks very much for being with us, Stuart. Well, the leaders of the EU, NATO, G7 meeting yesterday. Let's talk about the reaction coming from the Kremlin to these particular meetings.
Well, I think one important thing to understand about how Russia reacts to these leaders and their discussions is that it believes that all of these bodies you just mentioned are ultimately beholden to the United States and therefore are working on behalf of US interests, not their own independent interests. And that's clearer when you understand or you then hear the comments of, for example, the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, who talks about this all being a part of an attempt by the West and the United States to cut off Russia and weaken its economy. He says that attempts so far have been partially successful, but ultimately they will not succeed, with their the whole understanding, the assumptions behind them not making sense, in the idea that the West and Europe can easily cut itself off from Russia. As you said, 2027 is a long way away, and in the meantime Russia's under no illusions that Europe will still require its gas and oil. Also, there hasn't been any reaction to this particular comment, neither a change of policy from Russia or a statement, which I think underlines how at the moment Russia feels quite relaxed about this decision. Also worth bearing in mind that gas is at the heart of this particular deal, but Russia receives most of its foreign income not from gas but from oil, and this is something that so far has not been able to be touched by European states. There is an agreement by the UK and US not to import so much oil from Russia, but that is not so meaningful when you consider that for Russia about a majority of its energy exports do go to Europe and not to the UK and the United States.
And Stuart, let's talk about the latest on the talks.
Yeah, so they are happening in the words of Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, practically every day by video call. But in terms of news and breakthroughs, there's been silence for a few days now. No updates, as we were hearing maybe around 2 or 3 weeks ago. And similarly, no comments on the latest change in position. That, I would suggest, could be interpreted two ways. One, that breakthroughs are not being made, although the Russian Foreign Minister Maria Zakharova on Thursday said that talks are progressing. She didn't hint there was any kind of impasse or a cessation of talks due to problems. The other interpretation could mean that progress is being made, but neither side has made any public declaration of breakthroughs on any kind of major sticking points like that of neutrality for Ukraine or what demilitarization really means. We got an idea of how maybe Russia is seeing a off-ramp to this special military operation, as it's called here in Russia, from the Crimean Parliament, self-recognized Crimean Parliament, of course, now part of Russia. The speaker there suggested that Russia may be looking for a sort of little Russia situation where part of Ukraine, that Donbass, Luhansk area, would be linked to Crimea, and so that southeastern portion would become a new buffer state. So maybe that's where things are heading, but we know that Ukraine is adamant it will not give up any territory to achieve it, and so whether there is any room for such an arrangement is still unclear.
Yeah, and Russia is working hard to manage the impact of the sanctions. What measures have been taken by Moscow in the fight against the sanctions?
Indeed, the government tends to brush off that they're having much of an impact, but certainly they are in many different ways. Take, for example, one of Russia's most important industries, gas. We were talking about it just now. One independent provider of energy in Russia is now saying it's no longer going to be undertaking new projects because of difficulties with Western sanctions, not on the gas itself, but on international payments. And that really has been the big difficulty for the country recently, not having enough money or not being able to find a way around to import certain goods, but being able to pay for them has been the big difficulty, not just for the government paying off its debts, not just for the big corporations trying to import things into Russia, but also for ordinary people just trying to access funds which may be stored abroad or try and make payments to international companies. For example, the music streaming software Spotify has pulled out of the country, not because of any principled position, but simply it cannot make payments. And that, I would suggest, is the overarching theme right now. Sanctions of the type we're seeing from the US and the EU on oligarchs and on companies will take months to have a big effect, but the immediate impact is on the lack of ability for ordinary people and companies to make their payments, and that is definitely being felt and being reflected in the weakened ruble.
All right, thanks very much, Stuart Smith. To you, he's our SABC correspondent in Russia, in Moscow for us then. All right, let's bring it back to Africa then. Africa's leading carrier, Ethiopian Airlines, is preparing a change in leadership after its CEO, Tewolde Gebremariam, stepped down this week, citing ill health. Gebremariam is one of the biggest figures in African aviation. He expanded Ethiopian Airlines to become an international heavyweight, tripling its size and fleet. As part of its future plans, the Ethiopian carrier has signaled that it is ready to help South African airlines if asked to do so. SABC correspondent Coletta Wanjohi reports from Addis Ababa.